Welcome back to Edgework here on the Hammer Betting Network, a daily live NHL show Monday through Friday, 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. Today is Friday, March 10th. Quickly approaching the playoffs. We're starting to see some more movement in the playoff standings. Some teams that are kind of looking like they are bowing out more and more each day. But one of the big things that we're excited for here, especially on the Hammer Betting Network, is the March Madness tournament. And if you are interested in March Madness, make sure to come join us this Sunday, as we will be doing a live watch along during Selection Sunday with a bunch of creators across the network. You're definitely going to want to check that out, but that will be on the Hammer HQ main YouTube channel. So if you haven't already, subscribe to the Edgework HQ YouTube channel first, but then after this show, you can head on over to the Hammer HQ. Subscribe there. You will find us Sunday afternoon doing a live watch along of Selection Sunday, breaking down some of the teams, how the matchups lay out, all of that. So it'll be pretty fun. Make sure to subscribe, turn on notifications so that you don't miss that show. Rob, we only got 2 games here today. It's kind of crappy games as well. And unfortunately, every time I look at the schedule and it seems like we have no games going on, it seems like Anaheim, Chicago, Columbus, Montreal, Philly, they're the teams that are involved in this. But it's a tough one today. We'll go through those.
Yeah, I went to bed last night not realizing there was only 2 games this morning, and then woke up and saw what the matchups were and what the lines were on the games. And it makes it inherently challenging at this point of the year, because either, you got to take a shot on a team that's completely out of it, nothing to play for, that traded away most of their top assets at the deadline, or you got to lay an absurd price with, in my opinion, Calgary or Florida, neither of whom are even a very good team anyways. So really challenging. Dug through the props market. We can talk about that a little bit, especially for Florida tonight, but it's just not an appealing board, Zach.
No, not at all. Yeah, that's the worst part about it. It's like, it's not even just 2 games, and it's not just some crappy teams, but it's like a crappy team in a situation where the prices are getting out of hand, and you wouldn't necessarily want to play it on the better teams in Florida and Calgary and these ones. You don't necessarily trust these teams, but more to that, we will get into that after we break down these 2 games. We'll get into a new segment that we're going to do here. We're going to tier these teams down from cup contenders to dumpster fire organizations that are out there right now. So if anybody in the chat during these games has questions, bets you guys are looking at, like I'm seeing here right now, Todd already looking at Panthers first period minus 0.5. But if anybody has bets like that, we'll talk about them on the show during the games, and then we're going to get into the tiers, break those all down. And if you guys have input, we are more than interested to hear what you guys have to say. So fire them away in the YouTube chats. But let's start with the games. I'm not as interested in the games as we kind of touched on there, but I am interested in the first team that we're going to look at here, the Florida Panthers. You're looking at Florida right now. They are 4 points out of a playoff spot, tied with points with Ottawa. They've got to get one more game played than them, but you're 4 points back of Pitt, 6 points back of the Islanders. You're going to face Chicago tonight, who's 5-5 in their last 10. They're terrible on the road, 9-19-2. This should be a spot for Florida to win. You're looking at this price right now, as you mentioned, very long, minus 444 on the Panthers to win tonight. Is this a team that you can trust at all? And I kind of come at that from the perspective of they're trying to make the playoffs here. They think they could have a shot if you go on a little bit of a run, win a couple of games, but this is a Florida team, even tonight against Chicago, I don't necessarily trust that much.
I completely agree with you. I mean, I haven't trusted the Panthers for the majority of the year. When we look at their expected goals numbers, they're actually pretty decent. They've been solid at 5 versus 5, but for whatever reason, have managed to underperform. And it's either like they get a bad stretch of goaltending, they can't score for a little while. The trade of Mackenzie Weegar in the offseason as part of the Huberdeau deal just set their blue line back a big time. I think Paul Maurice is one of the worst head coaches around as well, which is there's all these contributing factors. And you get to this point in the season where we're like 2/3 of the way there, a little bit more than that. And people are like just expecting these teams to, we'll talk about Calgary too afterwards, where they like Calgary's expected goals numbers pop off the page. Like the reality doesn't match the perception with a lot of these teams. And people just think like, oh, they're going to snap their fingers and they're going to go on a run. Like Florida was one of the teams that could not acquire any assets at the deadline. because they didn't have any assets to give away, for one, and they're in salary cap hell right now as well. They're up against it completely. So they didn't improve at the deadline. All these other teams in the East improved around them, but we're kind of here talking ourselves into something's going to be different over the latter half of this season. And I just don't see it personally. I would never lay this price with the Panthers. I mean, even just laying puck line, minus one
That's
and a
first
half,
period.
minus 180, minus 175, best price in market. Like, that's absurd to me. And don't get me wrong, there's a massive talent gap between these two teams. Like, I'm not here, suggesting that these teams are closer to even than the line dictates. No, Florida is way, way better than Chicago. But hockey is a game with a ton of variance and randomness. We see this all the time. Good teams losing to horrible teams, and it's like a head scratcher. And depending on what market, you're in, your fan base might want to just blow the entire team up based off of one result. It's hockey. It happens. It's low scoring, high variance type of game. And to lay this type of price with the Panthers, knowing that there's a chance that, we have Bobrovsky confirmed in net, but he's liable to lay an egg at any time, pretty much. Okay. Hard pass on this one for me. I've been, honestly, just with the Panthers, I've been donking off money on Matthew Tkachuk anytime goal scorers for a while now. It's getting to the point where his underperformance versus his underlying metrics is absurd. Like, if we look at the past 30 days, Matthew Tkachuk has 7.14 individual expected goals, and he has 1 goal. So that will correct at some point. But am I in a rush? Like, because they're playing Chicago tonight, he's going to be favored. He's laying juice to score a goal. I can't do it. I can't do it tonight. Just one of these nights, Zach, where it's just like, I want to find a bet. I'm trying to find a bet. It's challenging to do so.
Yeah, last night, we obviously did the show yesterday, and there was a ton of games, so I was watching everything that was going on, monitoring, and then usually kind of towards the end of the night as the games are wrapping up, I go through, look at the games for the next day, and I was like, what the hell are we doing? Like, yep. What are these games tomorrow? Do you have any thoughts on what Todd said in chat here? For Panthers first period minus 0.5. I'm seeing it right now coming in at minus 110 is best price available, and it seems you can find a lot around there, minus 110, 11, 12. Yeah, there's a few minus 110s actually out there. But is there any thoughts on laying that with the Panthers tonight?
So I'm not a huge first period bettor. I see Alex Smith does this a lot on edge work over the course of the week. Todd does it as well. To me, if I'm being honest, I respect Todd quite a bit. I would not be laying vig on the Panthers to win a period. That's just my personal preference. Like, I was expecting to see prices in the plus 100, plus 105 range when you pulled it up on screen. It's not that. And again, I get the talent discrepancy between these two teams, but this is 20 minutes of play where one team is likely to get five shots more than the other team on average, 4 to 5 more, and you're going to have to lay that price for them to win by a goal. I'm not in love with it personally.
Yeah. Fair enough. Okay, well, we'll move on from that one. No bets in there. As we said, this is going to be there's 2 games, so there's not much we can do with this. We're not going to force it. Final game of the night. And this one, again, I'm coming at from the perspective of Calgary, looking at them going into this. They're on a 2-game win streak. You just beat Dallas. You beat Minnesota. Those are some of the top teams in the West out there, specifically number 1 and number 2 in the Central. And they're currently 4 points out of a playoff spot. They're 4 points back of Winnipeg, but they played the same amount of games. So they're going to have to do some work if they want to catch up. Now, 9 points behind Edmonton. They've got a game in hand on Edmonton, but I don't foresee them catching the Oilers. I think even if Edmonton doesn't go on some type of crazy run, they're going to be able to still maintain points and getting some wins out of their remaining games. But this Calgary team, we started to see some life out of Jacob Markstrom over the last little while. It's not been anything crazy. He's not back to being Jacob Markstrom, but we're starting to see it. Now you're looking at, again here, a massive price against Anaheim, minus 370 for them on the money line. But with Markstrom kind of getting into a bit of a groove, would Calgary potentially be a team that you'd start to look to back, or maybe even in this spot against Anaheim tonight?
Well, I think if Markstrom does find his form, like if we get a consistent run out of him here, where it's like, okay, he's back at the numbers that we've seen him produce in the past. Not only do I like Calgary, but I actually think that they're a content. Like I know that they're out of the playoff spot right now, right? And they're going to
Yeah.
have to make up some ground on other teams. But I do think that they're capable of going on that run later in the year because a lot of times they were just sewered by bad goaltending over the course of the year. And listen, they didn't make any big deadline acquisitions either. Nick Ritchie, Troy Stetcher, like these guys are
The
not going to
brother
move.
swap.
Yeah, they're not going to move the needle overall. But you have a Minnesota Wild team that loses Kaprizov for 3 to 4 weeks. You have the Jets who are falling off. If Calgary sneaks in and Markstrom is playing at a high level, they have the underlying metrics this year where a lot of people will fancy them as some sort of dark horse. The thing for me is I'm a huge analytical guy. If people don't know that about me. However, as the season moves further and further along, I think the likelihood of teams catching up to their analytics diminishes. So early on in the year, you play your first 20, 30 games of the year and it's like, wow, like, Calgary's getting really unlucky here. Like they're dominating, 60% expected goals over the course of these 20 games and they just can't find the back of the net. Something's going to turn around. Then the season keeps going and it just doesn't change. And it keeps going and it just doesn't change. And you reach a point where you're like, it's probably not going to change. This is probably what the team is. And there's a consistent reason why they are consistently underperforming or overperforming versus their analytics. And I think that's Calgary this year. Right. I mean, if you look at where they've been ranked in the betting market for the majority of the year, they've been consistently ranked as a top 10 team, even though they've never been close to a top 10 team at any point. And people just like, again, and I don't blame people. It's, like a lot of the things you'll look at on paper look great. Watch Flames games. They pin teams deep all the time. Great cycle. And then just goal comes the other way out of nothing type of situation. And that's been the story for them this year. I remember when they played the Leafs a few weeks back, listening to Nazem Kadri talk about them after the game. He's basically insinuated, he's like, this team is cursed. He's like, this is our story of the season. We hit the post one way, they go around the other way and they score. It's like, that's been our entire season. And he's not wrong, but I don't know. Like, again, with what we've seen out of Calgary this year, what's our goal differential on the season? They're like 0, basically, like right in around that. And I get that Anaheim's a complete dumpster.
It's exactly 0.
I get you don't have to sell me on Anaheim. Anaheim and Chicago, who are playing tonight, are the 2 worst teams in the league, in my opinion, right now, roster construction. But do I trust Calgary at these prices? I've seen this game play out a dozen times this year with the Flames, where they shellac a team and they can't win the game. So that's where I stand on this. Honestly, Zach, like we're not going to lock. This is not an edge in any, like by any stretch of the imagination. But the Florida-Chicago game starts at 7 p.m. Eastern tonight. At probably 6:59 p.m. Eastern tonight, I will donk off a parlay on the Blackhawks and the Ducks. And it'll pay.
Ask you.
It'll pay like 18-1. The prices might even go up further over the course of the day because nobody wants to bet these trash teams. Like in the 20-1 range with the amount of variance in hockey. That's likely how I'll be enjoying my Friday night. And by enjoying, I mean hating my Friday night.
Yeah. Yeah. I just clicked on it to see what it would be at right now. If you took best price in market, which is actually happens to be at the same sports book. I'll show this on the screen here. On Chicago and Anaheim, and you're looking at about almost 19-1 there on these guys parlayed together to win this one tonight. But yeah, I was going to ask you if that was going to be something of interest, because the other day, I don't know if you caught the Tuesday show, we didn't lock it in, but it was something that we discussed was Arizona -1.5, which would have been the alt line because they were actually +1.5 and they were the dog in that game. And I believe it was Anaheim as well, -1.5 against Seattle. Unfortunately, Anaheim lost 5-2, and it was Arizona won 6-2 over St. Louis. So we had the one side there, but yeah.
Yeah.
That was
I
where
mean,
we wrapped
listen,
that.
this, in my opinion, like the reason I don't want to lock this in is I actually don't think this is a great bet per se. I just think
Right.
it's the best way for me to have an enjoyable Friday night with a rooting interest, or at
Right.
least like lottery ticket Friday. It's not that absurd. Like you think at what people bet at 18-1 or 19-1, 20-1 in sports, and you're like, there's no way that that's going to come through, but people will bet it anyways. Like this is way more likely. Like it's 2 hockey games. The randomness in the sport for those people who don't like consistently watch is just, I mean, it's not beyond a shadow of the doubt that both these teams get doubled up in shots and win a game. Like
Yeah.
that's the NHL. It
Yeah.
happens literally every night.
Yep. Yeah. All right. Well, that's it for the games for tonight. Let's get into the tiers. So we're going to debut this for the first time. I think this is probably the easiest way to pull this up here. We're going to have different tiers that we're going to go through and rank the NHL teams. So for anybody who's on podcasts right now listening back, let me just run through this real quick. It is on Tier Maker. So we're going to take the logos of the teams. We're going to take the teams and just drop them into them. But starting at the top, we go from Cup Fave / Elite. Next, Cup Contenders. Then we have Good Teams, Overrated, Underrated, Meh, Trash, and finally, Dumpster Fire. This was Rob who came up with these here, so give credit to Rob for those. I think those are good. This is a good ranking system.
It is a horrible scale though, because overrated and underrated are completely different than everything else. So there's going to be teams that could fall into multiple categories, but
Yeah.
So we have like our top 3 levels and bottom 3, which are just like standard ranking levels, and then the middle, overrated, underrated, I think serve good betting utility going forwards. Teams you might be able to capitalize on in the betting market.
Right. So where do you want to start here? Do we want to start at the top? Do we want to go alphabetical order of the teams? Bottom? What's the way you're
Let's go with the teams from the bottom because it makes it so easy. So Anaheim is a dumpster fire. There are 2 dumpster fire teams in the league. Anaheim is one of them. Arizona, we don't have to talk too much about, but they're in the trash category.
Okay.
To me, if you gave me Arizona as a pick'em on neutral ice against Anaheim or Chicago, I'm betting Arizona every single time. It's not so we have to put them in a level above. Now, Boston. And by the way, if you're in the chat here on Edgework, I'd be very interested if people think I'm completely wrong on something. So please let me know if you do think that I'm completely out to lunch with something, because I am interested with this stuff. Boston is is right at the top. And this is like obvious reasons, right? Now, with that said, Boston's on track to be a historically good team. Their peripheral metrics, like their expected goals, Corsi, they're not historically good. A lot of what Boston's done this year is made up through elite goaltending. And I'm not suggesting that Allmark will drop off in the playoffs. They actually have a great backup in Jeremy Swayman as well. And they're definitely deserving of being like Cup favorites, elite team. But I do think that they are still ripe for the picking. Like I think back to a couple years ago when I thought Colorado was just going to like jam their way through the entire NHL. And then they got to that Vegas series and they won the first 2 games and everyone wrote Vegas off and Vegas just like dominated them for 4 games. I'm not saying that can happen to Boston, but their 5-on-5 numbers are not off the charts good. They're just good. And a lot of what they've done this year has been made up through goaltending. So it'll be interesting to see, but like they're definitely the Cup favorites right now and they deserve to be atop the list.
Yeah, and a comment here from Matt D, just referring to the parlay. Dogs parlay is a lock per Rob, 10-unit whale play. But Matt D also comes in and says, you're too low on the Yotes here, Rob.
Too low on the Yotes?
Too low on the Yotes, yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah,
I mean,
I'm with you on the trash right now.
Well, they're not like a meh team, you know?
No.
They're
Rob, we're looking at a team here in Arizona who is skirting the rules of the salary cap to get to the floor. Yeah. Not to stay under the cap, to get to the floor. They're rostering an AHL team out there in Arizona to get to the floor of this. Like they are trash. They have players there. They try hard. that's where it ends. Like
Yeah.
they have some guys, they try hard. Yeah.
Like the Buffalo Sabres are the next team on my list, and they're a meh team to me. Like, put them in the meh category. For a while, I thought, okay, maybe this team has a run in them, top end talent, great goal scoring. Every single time this team plays, like, steps up in class, they lose. And like last night, they give up 10 goals in the process, losing to the Dallas Stars. Like, that's a meh team here. Arizona's not in the same category as Buffalo. So this is how I'm delineating these so far. And I think this one's a pretty clear cut, they're in this category type of situation.
Yeah. I'm also just realizing how we might get really messed up by this underrated, overrated categories.
Well, let's start it right now. Calgary Flames, overrated category. And again, this is relative to the betting market. This is not like when you're saying something, a team, a player, or whatever is overrated or underrated, it's got to be relative to something. And it's typically what people think of them. And the betting market consistently values Calgary, like I said earlier, as like this borderline top 10 team. And they've been there all year. They're not. They don't make upgrades at the deadline like a lot of other teams across the West did, or even across the East. I think they've been firmly entrenched in this category for a while now. Now, that doesn't mean that they're entrenched in there forever. Because to me, why Calgary is overrated is because people think of Markstrom as like a different goalie than he actually is. They think of the Markstrom from the past. And that can turn. Like, goalies are voodoo. It can happen at any point where guy just goes on a run. But as they stand right now, the Flames, as much as I hate to say it, I think are an overrated team.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I don't have too much else to say there. I think I even could put them into a meh at this point for myself, like sliding them down to a meh, where they're just kind of, they're a team that could make the playoffs. I'm not surprised if they don't make it. You don't get the goaltending. Daryl Sutter, I think the way that he plays the team brings them to a different state than what the team is probably more built for at this point. You adding in Kadri, Huberdeau, Uyghur, add guys like that. You still have skill players around them in Dubé and Lindholm and stuff, and you kind of just, the way that they're played, they structure, everything else is very just slow and not fun, as Alan Walsh said.
I think a lot of these like analytical sites nowadays as well affect the public opinion on a team. So like if we look at Money Puck, for example, and look at Money Puck's team rankings right now, they have the Calgary Flames 6th in the league.
Yep.
The Calgary Flames are not the 6th best team in the league. I mean, they're not, period. No. That they have the potential to be that. Like, I loved Calgary going into this year, been totally wrong about them. Again, Markstrom returns to form. You can find that, but this team leaves so much to be desired. And I don't have the numbers in front of me of like if you've bet on this team all year, you faded this team all year. But I imagine if you just faded Calgary every single game this year, you would have made a killing this season based off of the way that they've been priced.
I believe Russ had said that on the show the other day. Someone had said it on one of the Edgework shows. I think it was Russ was saying that that was the case with Calgary this year. But Matt D saying Sutter is low-key just torts.
I would tend to agree. Yeah. Like a lot of these coaches, it drives me up a wall because, they turn a team around, they have some success, and then they just lose the team completely, falls. And, the amount of retread coaching hires in the NHL is just absurd to
insane.
me. Yeah.
All right, let's move on here. Carolina.
I'm going to put them in the Cup faves / elite category.
Okay.
Behind Boston. And I think that this is probably going to be the only two in this category. We'll go through the rest. Obviously, there's the Western Conference as well. But I really think that these two teams are largely better than everyone else in the league right now. That's, my personal opinion. I just think that they're so incredibly deep relative to the rest. And that's not to say that there aren't very good teams in the NHL. But Shane Gostisbehere comes in there, starts playing on the power play.
Mhm.
They're popping goals all of a sudden now as well with him in the lineup. It's a pretty deep team. Now, concerns about goaltending? Sure. I think actually Antti Ranta has been better than Freddie Anderson this year. I think they've played the same amount of games, and Ranta has a better goal save above expected and goal saved above average. But I mean, the likelihood that they're able to get one of those two guys into good form for a playoff run, I think, is high.
Yeah.
I put them in this category. I think there's a slight gap between them and Boston, but there's also a gap between them, Carolina, and everyone else in the East.
Yeah. The only reservation that I had was goaltending with Carolina. A lot of that has to do with bias of having seen Freddie Anderson in Toronto and watching what goes on there. And you watch him in the playoffs last year. I believe Freddie didn't even play until later in the series or in the playoffs for Carolina. Like they had trouble with him just not even going in the net. I have reservations there, but as far as the rest of the team and the idea that you could just get one of them going, I would agree with you here in terms of being cup fave / elite. But I see Todd's not too happy with your saying these are the only two teams. He wants to know, are you aware that it is Timo time?
I am aware. I don't think that news has gone unnoticed around the league.
Yeah. All right, next team here, Columbus Blue Jackets. Trash.
And I don't think it's even up for debate.
Yeah. Chicago Blackhawks.
That's dumpster fire.
Yeah.
We can debate which one of those two is ahead of the other. Chicago and Anaheim. Personally, just by my numbers, I'd have Anaheim it's like a tiny bit ahead, but Chicago's in good form. I don't know. I think we can just keep this as is right now.
Okay. The Avalanche, Cup contenders.
Okay. So this is one of the toughest ones in the entire league.
Yeah.
I'm going to throw them in the Cup contenders category, but they could easily also go into the overrated category because I think a lot of why we are building Colorado into a cup contender is not necessarily their performance this season. It's more so built off of last season. Right. And it's a different team. If we look at the betting market, in terms of like Stanley Cup futures, they'd be second favorite to Boston right now. I don't agree with that personally. So it's choose your own at this point. But Makar's back. The team is still pretty solid top to bottom. I'm concerned in net with them, with Georgiev being the guy that's going to be,
Well, how much different do you think that is from Kemper last year? Like, where is the difference for you there?
So, like, the thing with Kemper is that Kemper actually was he didn't have the greatest postseasons, but he was a very, very good regular season goalie. Like, if you look at goal saved above expected for years, Kemper was top 5 pretty consistently. Do you need a great goaltending performance to win the Stanley Cup? I'm contrary to belief, you don't necessarily. Now, obviously, it's a huge advantage if you have someone that's standing on their head. They can steal series. So can Colorado still win it? Sure, they can. But this could have went into either category, really. Not a huge fan of like the deadline acquisitions, right? Lars Eller just still can't like do anything, basically. Mm-hmm. They brought in Jack Johnson again, who, I mean, he's actually been fine, but they didn't really improve all that much. West is really wide open. There are no, elite teams. I'll put them in cup contenders just based off of their pedigree, but could easily have put them in the overrated category as well.
All right. Next team, Dallas Stars.
Dallas Stars, cup contenders, and I would move them slightly ahead of Colorado. This might be like an opinion of my own that doesn't jive with everyone, but I think the Stars are solid top to bottom. I think they have a lot of depth. We've seen them struggle with scoring at points this year, and that's a concern. But Ottinger's been solid. We've seen him solid in the playoffs last year where he almost stole a series against the Calgary Flames where they just got completely destroyed. Dadonov looks great as a Dallas Star. He's found his form. Max Domi's starting to fit in. it's a pretty deep roster overall with good goaltending. I think the Stars are a legit contender here. I think I'm going to have 3 teams in the West that are above everyone else. And I think we've identified 2 of the 3 so far.
Okay. Jordan Mosel asking, do you think it's something with Colorado that makes goalies, quote, look better than they are? Grubauer, Kemper, Georgiev, all were in like the top 15 in goal save above expected.
Certainly possible, but to my recollection, Kemper had good numbers before going over there as well. Yeah, I don't know. Grubauer fell off a cliff after going to Seattle. Georgiev has improved. Yeah, it's a valid point. I mean, it's probably something to look into in the offseason for me on, team defensive metrics and how they can affect the actual goaltender performance. But it's a good point.
Okay, next team, Detroit Red Wings.
Meh team.
Okay. Edmonton Oilers here.
Edmonton's a cup contender.
Okay.
Because
and in terms of ranking in this category behind that Colorado,
honestly, I currently think Edmonton's the best team in the West.
Okay.
Like if you gave me, if betting odds aside, the way McDavid is playing right now, we haven't seen anything like this in a long, long time in the NHL. Yeah. They have far and away the best player in the league. Like to have someone who can score 2 goals in a row for 5 straight games is absurd. They're starting to ride Stuart Skinner, who is good. Like they've gotten rid of, those Campbell starts for the most part. Yep. Mattias Ekholm was a huge addition for the Oilers. Huge. Because that defensive core was terrible altogether. So I don't see much separating these 3 teams right now. Okay. I really don't. Any given day, based off of even one game, I might see a fluctuation in how I rank these 3 teams. But I do think that these 3 teams are the best in the West. And I think that there's a drop-off to everyone else.
Edmonton currently sitting in a wild card spot. You think that'll change by playoff time?
It may not. I mean, it's a valid point that somebody might say, oh, how are you putting a wild card team in as your one of your 3 cup contenders in the West? The Ekholm trade is a lot for me. And I just think that I've watched a lot of Edmonton play recently. Fast team. They're going to give a lot of teams problems. Right. They do have the history of playoff disappointment as well. And that's something to consider. But something feels a little bit different about the Oilers for me this season.
Okay, fair enough. Florida Panthers.
Florida goes into the overrated bucket. You cannot keep valuing Florida also in like the Calgary range as a borderline top 10 team. Like they're out of the playoffs right now and they have games to make up. Like they've played more games than the teams around them. Florida's not good. I'm sorry. And they've consistently been valued as a good team. No deadline acquisitions, overrated by a mile. Maybe more overrated than Calgary if you want to flip those 2 around.
Sure.
All right.
Yeah. Florida is the Calgary of the East. That's kind of what they are. Like and the best part is that they were the teams that went and swapped with each other on these massive moves in the offseason. But LA Kings next up.
Good team.
Jason Joshi saying King slander will not be tolerated. So
I mean, listen, like I'm not out. I'm not out to rip anyone's teams. I'm just like trying to be a realist here. I think LA is a good team. Can they make the cup? Sure they can. It's the NHL. Like we've seen this happen before. It's a tournament with a high amount of variance. You win, you get in, you have a chance. They pick up Gavrikov, who's actually like been really, really solid for them since coming over. Korpisalo's made some big saves in net. I just compare their roster to others, and I mean, they just don't have the top end talent, I think, of the other teams in the West. So they're a very good team. Could they give any of the teams above them a problem? For sure. They could win a series against Edmonton or Dallas or Colorado. Like I'll never put that past them. But I mean, I'm trying to rank these in terms of, if you get essentially, if LA and Edmonton were playing tonight at a neutral venue, I'm making Edmonton a pretty decent size favorite over them, as I am with Dallas, as I am with Colorado, even though they lost to them last night. That's not changing things for me. So Kings are a good team. They'll, on the cusp of being in that cup contender group, but I just don't think that they have the overall roster.
Right. Minnesota Wild.
Obviously now we have to deal with the Kaprizov injury. So,
yes.
I would still put Minnesota in the good teams bucket, but they'll probably be towards the bottom of that. This is a big injury for them because Minnesota already lacks top end shooting talent, and they get rid of one of their top end shooters. It's going to be an issue, but they can pull out some low scoring games like they did the other night against Winnipeg because they have Gustafsson, and also like Marc-Andre Fleury now has had a few starts in the past month where he's just completely stole games and been in very good form. So goaltending is pretty solid for them. They're just a solid team. Again, like they're not going to wow anyone. I'll be floored if they make the cup this year, but they're good.
Before we go on to the next team, I just want to remind people, if you're watching right now and you haven't hit subscribe on this channel, please make sure to do so. Take 2 seconds, hit the subscribe button on the Edgework HQ YouTube. As well, you could go over to the Hammer HQ YouTube because we will have a live watch along for Selection Sunday. This Sunday for March Madness, we'll be watching that with a bunch of guests coming through, talking about the teams that are selected, the rankings, and previewing the tournament a little bit. So that'll be on there. But make sure to subscribe to that channel as well as here on the Edgework HQ. If you enjoy the show today so far, please make sure to hit like on this stream and let us know your thoughts as we continue on ranking out these teams in the chat. Let us know if you think we're right, wrong, or just maybe complete idiots of what we're our ranking system. We're open to hearing it all. So let us know in the chat there. But next team, Montreal Canadiens.
So let's put them at the top of the trash category for now. I think it's
okay.
pretty evident that they're
the upper class of the trash.
So far, I think we're going to have some better trash teams as we go through the list, but they're firmly entrenched there for now.
Okay. Nashville Predators.
Nashville is a meh team. Probably just behind Buffalo. Pretty close. I mean, they lost to Arizona last night, a game that they kind of got outplayed in as well. They've just got rid of a lot of their talent altogether. They still have UC Saros though, so that's one thing that's going for them. But they're firmly entrenched in this meh category.
All right, here we go, Rob. I don't know if you're ready for this one and the potential backlash you could face here. The New Jersey Devils.
Cup contenders ahead of Edmonton right now as well.
Okay.
So the Devils are solid. I think people think that the Rangers and Devils are closer than I actually think that they are within that division. New Jersey's had a lot of these games this season where they've outplayed a team pretty badly. It actually happened against Toronto the other night where they just haven't been able to get a result. It's a little bit concerning for me when that happens consistently, but obviously the addition of Timo Meier was huge for them. He's been very good at 5-on-5 so far since coming over. He had like the hiccup on the power play against the Leafs where he had it stripped by Marner. But aside from that, pretty complete roster overall. Love the decor for them. Solid. Like I don't have bad things to say about New Jersey. Other than that, I just think Boston and Carolina are marginally better at this point.
All right. The New York Islanders.
This is going to probably... Man, I've gotten into it with the Islanders fan base for a long time. I'm putting the Islanders as the best meh team in the league. They're on track now to make the playoffs. I don't see them as being very good. Like, again, they're just, to me, a very average team. The addition of Bo Horvat, big for them. Pierre Engvall's playing in the bottom six for them. But they've been on a run, even without Matthew Barzal, which has been big for them. and they will eventually get him back at some point. I think they're 6-2 without him in the lineup. They just don't have the depth, man. Like if you look at the Islanders roster, top to bottom, they just are not deep enough relative to these other teams in the Eastern Conference. They get into a playoff situation and their third line's going toe to toe with another team's third line. They're going to get creamed. And the same with their fourth line. They just don't have the depth of these other East teams.
And next New York team here, the New York Rangers.
The New York Rangers can go into two categories for me. They can go into the good team category or the overrated category. I'll throw them in the good team category. I'll throw them in the good team right at the front so far. By virtue of the fact that they play in the East, and the East is so much better than the West.
Right.
I think a lot of people see the Rangers as a team that they're not. Obviously, they have a lot of star power. You look at the names that they have on paper, solid. But a lot of the play of these players does not match the name. Like Patrick Kane, for example, right? They acquire Patrick Kane. He scores his first with the Rangers last night.
Yep.
Patrick Kane has still been trash since coming over to the Rangers. He is a massive defensive liability. Now, don't let people in the media tell you that who are going to praise Patrick Kane for scoring a goal and contributing now, but you can't play like that in the playoffs. And maybe he has a big playoff goal in him or something, but I think a lot of their top end talent is overrated. But what I especially think that people don't realize is that Igor Shesterkin this year is not the same goalie as he was last year. And that to me is the biggest difference. Like last year, the Rangers could get destroyed in every single game at 5-on-5, and they would win games because Shesterkin was so good. They don't have that. I'm not saying Shesterkin's bad, by the way. He's just not performing at the elite level he was last year. So they don't have it in them, in my opinion, to face a team like the Devils or the Hurricanes in the playoffs who are going to drive play at 5-on-5, and the goalie's just going to have to continuously bail them out. So for that reason, I lump them a tier below. I might be on my own here, but that's just my personal opinion on the Rangers right now.
No, I think I'm in the same boat as you, and watching them play, it's not blow you away kind of hockey where you're like, wow, this team is that good. And it's been like that for probably like the last week now, at least for me watching them. So I'm on the same page as you with the Rangers there. Next team, this one I'm interested to hear where you have them at, because I told you the other day I placed a future on this team, the Ottawa Senators, to make the playoffs, grab that plus 750 after talking through it with so money. But where do you have the Ottawa Senators right now?
This will be the first team in the underrated bucket, as much as it pains me to say it. The market has not caught up to Ottawa yet. Chychrun being there now is massive difference for that decor. And obviously, like, we know the caliber of player that he is, and that trade was highly talked about. But Ottawa has played better for a long time now. Now, do I think Ottawa is going to get in as a wild card team and upset Boston or Carolina? I don't. I think they'll probably get reamed in one of those series. But this is a team that's been ranked in like the bottom 12 of the NHL by the betting market for a long time now, and they're not a bottom 12 team. And as long as they keep getting valued at those prices, they are underrated. So as much as it pains me as a Leafs fan, they got until the market catches up on them, they're the first team in the underrated bucket.
Jordan Mosel saying they still have to ride on Mads Sogard.
Their goaltending's been scary all year in terms of, like, you never know what you're going to get. And obviously that's a concern, but it's, again, we're talking relative to expectations, right? Mm-hmm. And they're better than being ranked the 20th best team in the league. Oh my God.
Did Mark Mathot get to Rob? I saw Mark Mathot yesterday tweeting. The funniest part about that was he had that tweet, what was it, 2 years ago? He said, the Senators will be better than the Leafs 2 to 3 years from now. Someone went back and said, today's the 2-year anniversary of this tweet. Let's take a look at the standings. And then Mark Mathot came back. I actually respect Mark Mathot. I like hearing him talk about things going around the league, but like I at this point I don't even know if this guy's just trolling or not on online. I think he is because he's just roasting Leafs fans all the time, and it's like you got to know what you're doing if you're getting
Yep.
into that game.
Yep.
So,
Agreed.
the Philadelphia Flyers fire their GM this morning, so very fresh here. Looks like Danny Briere will hop in as the interim GM for the time being. I would imagine they're going to hire him as the full-time GM at the conclusion of this season, but it's not just a lock at this point. But where did the Philadelphia Flyers come in for you?
Philly is the best trash team in the league. Thank you for cashing the +1.5 last night, Flyers. Thank you.
All right. The Pittsburgh Penguins.
Pittsburgh, throw them right into the overrated bucket. Maybe even above Florida. Let's put Pittsburgh, I think right now, could be the most overrated team in the league. I think a lot of this is built off of past playoff success.
Yeah.
Crosby, Malkin. Their deadline sucked, in my opinion. Granlund, Bonino, Kulikov. I don't know what this team is doing, but like they're this middling franchise that just seems content to be stuck in the middle right now. And again, betting market and where they're consistently valued. All these teams, Pittsburgh, Florida, Calgary, are all like valued in the same bucket. And they're all not like, they're all just very, very average teams. So I'll throw them in the overrated bucket. They might get into the playoffs, but I don't expect that they will do any damage in the playoffs. I just think they'll get overrun by a team that's much deeper than them. So I'm not high on Pittsburgh at all right now.
Okay. The San Jose Sharks.
They're slightly more trash than Philly.
Okay.
But less trash than the Habs.
Okay.
San Jose has very much been like an analytical darling this year as well. Like,
yeah.
And they do, I mean, Carlson probably getting the Norris, but aside from that, just too many close losses. Yeah, they're a trash team.
Does Carlson's team not having any success play any factor into the Norris for you, or are you just solely looking at the player himself and not the surrounding situation?
So for me, I don't think it's going to, because of Carlson's career, where he was already like a top caliber defenseman for a while, and then his play fell off, and now he's back there. And I could see it. I could have seen it if it was just like someone we didn't know about who came out of nowhere and is having the best season in the NHL, but played for a garbage team. I don't think they would get the credit that Carlson's been getting for his season.
Okay. 7 more teams, and I just thought about this. I'm not going to list through this and recap this at the end. So if you do want to see the list, if you want to catch up on what it is, you can follow us on Twitter at EdgeworkHQ, and I will tweet this full breakdown, the tiers out from there, because I just thought about the fact that there's 32 teams, and what is it? We got now 8 categories going on here. Like, I'm not going to be reading through these at the end. So if you want to see them, you can go over to the YouTube channel, the Edgework HQ YouTube channel, and see how we break them down. Or you can follow us on Twitter at Edgework HQ, and I'll tweet it out after the show comes to an end of our full tiers. Next team, St. Louis Blues.
The Blues are better than the Flyers, so they're not in the put them at the bottom of the meh category. The Blues could have a category of their own, but we won't give them one.
Okay. The Tampa Bay Lightning.
All right. I shouldn't do
here
this.
we go.
I shouldn't do this, because this will be just ammunition to be used against me at some point or another.
If you're in the chat right now, just be prepared. Clip this, screen record it, whatever you got to do.
Tampa Bay is going in the overrated bucket. I hate to do this.
Where do we want them? At the front of this bucket?
At the back, because they at least have a history. You can't take away what they've done, right? And they have the playoff pedigree. But this team is consistently valued as a top 5 team in the league, and they are not a top 5 team in the league. They're not. Even a guy like Victor Hedman, who obviously he's dealing with injury now. He's not having like a Victor Hedman type of year. The forward group is deep, but there's something wrong and broken about the Lightning, and has been for a while. And betting market thinks they're the 5th best team in the league. I don't think anyone should have this as a top 5 team right now with the way that they're playing.
Oh no!
Oh God!
So money, no.
No.
Leaves in 5. So money says. Oh boy! Well, that'll lead us into our very next team here, Rob. Mm-hmm. Of course, they get to go back to back on these ones. The Toronto Maple Leafs. Where do you got them?
Now, the Leafs are dealing with the Ryan O'Reilly injury. Yes. They scratched John Tavares against the Devils out of like an abundance of caution. The Leafs are a cup contender, and they are between the Devils and Oilers on this list. Okay. I don't think that there's much separating Toronto and New Jersey at full strength. Now, the Leafs have to get there, obviously. I think this could be a rough stretch for them without O'Reilly, who's a big acquisition for them. They're also very much tinkering with the lineup and haven't really figured out which D pairings work for them. But at full strength, they are a cup contender. I mean, you might hate Toronto. Lots of people do. They hate us because they ain't us. But the Leafs are solid top to bottom. So yeah.
Fat Bull saying Leafs are a good team. You're being a homer.
I mean, I don't think I am personally.
I don't think so either. I think this is like the anti-Toronto
of course
that comes into play on that.
They're going to roll out Matthews, Tavares, O'Reilly as 3 centers in the playoffs, and I mean that's pretty deep. They have. Here's another thing, like a lot of these guys aren't going to be dressing every single night, right? You have Gustafsson in the press box some nights, right? Shen, whatever. They're gonna mix it up, but there's not. They're the deepest team in the sense that they can overcome injuries and just plug and play someone back in the lineup with an injury, right? Especially at the defense position, and they haven't had that for a long time. I think anyone who doesn't think the Leafs are a cup contender, I'm going to say this as a Leafs fan, I think your opinion doesn't matter in hockey if you do not think the Leafs are a cup contender. You got to be a hater to think that this team cannot win a cup.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, fair enough. The Vancouver Canucks.
Vancouver's another Met team. Let's slot them between Detroit and St. Louis.
Okay.
By the way, for Vancouver, Beauvillier, right? Like this guy comes over, he's lighting it up now. What is wrong with these teams who trade players and put them in immediate positions to succeed? Like, do these guys not realize what Beauvillier's next contract is going to have to look like? Because the fact that this guy, like, bury this guy on the 4th line for the rest, like,
it's a double whammy too, right? Because now he's helping the team have some type of success and go the other way from going towards Bedard and having that opportunity. And then on top of that, what you're saying with the contract, like it's, what are we doing?
I don't get it, man. I don't get it.
Yeah. There's a question here from Matt D saying, why is Gustafsson not got a look on PP1? Why even acquire him in regards to the Leafs?
Yeah, you're gonna have to email Sheldon Keefe at MLSE to figure that one out. I don't know, honestly. I've never been a fan of Riley on PP1. I actually liked Sandin better on PP1 when he was in Toronto. I think Gustafsson should get a shot there as well. If it were me, I know that this is nuts, but I would move Riley to the wing for a few games to try him out on the wing.
Yep.
I know it's crazy, but they have so much depth on defense right now.
It's not that crazy anymore. It's not that crazy anymore.
It really, because they're going to have to scratch 3 NHL caliber defensemen every single night, or 2 if they want to go with 7D. I think they should try Riley on the wing.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It won't happen.
It's not crazy anymore. It won't happen, but no.
Yeah.
3 teams left. The Vegas Golden Knights.
Underrated.
Okay.
Now,
Ahead of Ottawa, behind Ottawa.
yeah, I think Vegas is maybe the most underrated team in the league. If you look
Okay.
at how they were priced at Tampa Bay last night, sorry, people, I wasn't on the show yesterday, but I bet Vegas. I mean, they the way that they're priced consistently now is that of like just an average team. They're not. And listen, this is not Mark Stone's out. Like you can't replace Mark Stone being on long-term IR. Like that's a big hole in the lineup. But Barbashev was a great addition for them overall.
Mm-hmm.
Am I a fan of the quick addition? No. I honestly but maybe he
Yeah.
amounts to something and whatever. But this is a team that's not like slightly above average. There's too much depth across the board. So yeah, they've been one that I've been consistently betting, I think, over the course of the past couple of weeks. I think the market's been slow to catch up to them. I think they're underrated. If they weren't in like one of these betting categories, I'd probably put them at the base of the cup contenders list.
Right. All right. 2 teams left. Washington Capitals.
Don't want to spend too much time here. Obviously, Washington saw the writing on the wall.
Yeah.
They are a meh team. I think probably between the Islanders and Buffalo right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's probably pretty accurate there. Last team, the Winnipeg Jets.
They, based off of their recent play, they're 2-9-2 in their last 13 games. They have now moved themselves into underrated territory. So I will be looking to back Winnipeg going forwards. I thought they played a great game. Right there is good. Yeah, they played a great game the other night against Minnesota, and Hellebuck was just off that night, and Marc-Andre Fleury was on. But we've gotten to territory now where people think that, like, you know, the talk is like Winnipeg's dropping out of the playoffs, and that's fine. They didn't have a ton of expectations going into the year, but Niederreiter was a big addition for them at the deadline. He really added to them up front. I don't think you're going to get a lot of games out of Hellebuck like you saw against Minnesota, where he was just, I mean, I want to say he was a train wreck because they lost 3-2, but let in a couple weak goals. I think they're in the category now where the market is just completely down on them relative to everyone else. And I think you'll find some good value on them going forwards.
Well, there you have it. There's our complete list compared to the betting markets on these teams, from cup faves all the way down to dumpster fire teams, broken down for all 32 NHL teams right now. So if you do want to see this full list posted after, you could obviously go to the YouTube, see it, and watch us break it down, or you can head over to the Edgework HQ Twitter, where after the show has come to a conclusion here, I will put that tweet out, so you can make sure to give us a follow on there and check that out. With only 2 games tonight and 2 crappy games at that, we have no best bets, so sorry to everyone.
You know what? Tier maker might not have the
list.
Kraken. Great point. All right.
I didn't even notice that.
I guess they made these NHL tiers long before the Kraken came into the league. Yes, we will do the Kraken for sure. Underrated. Same deal for me. I would put the Kraken in the underrated category. So here's the thing with Seattle, right? Seattle does not have top end talent. They don't. And that was why at the deadline, who's available at the deadline for the most part? Like, great depth players. And Seattle didn't really add to their team all that much. But again, if this is just relative to where I think the betting market sees them right now, they're way more solid than people give them credit for. And of course, the goaltending is an issue. It will always be. Like Jones, Grubauer, they gotta ride that tandem, and it is what it is. But the expectation for so long has been, Seattle's just going to completely fall off. This is a team that might bounce, and they may not have the best line one in the league, but through and through, the roster is solid, and I think that makes them an underrated team.
Okay, there you go. So now the list has come to completion here. I didn't even realize that it just wasn't on the list. It just slipped my mind.
Tier maker just said, "Fuck this." They gave up on it altogether. Now, once we tweet this out, though, this is a what's it? Cold takes, hot takes, old takes exposed.
Old takes exposed. Yeah,
I can totally see myself being tagged in that. 3 months from
Oh
now.
yeah. We'll see what happens, but it's tier maker basically just said, all right, Gary, that's enough. Please stop adding teams to this league. We're gonna see Atlanta coming back and Houston getting a team, and people in Quebec City are gonna be standing outside the NHL offices with pitchforks and flamethrowers and stuff, rioting over not having one. Yet Atlanta gets their third go around. So that'll be coming up in the near future. And when we do add new teams to the NHL, it'll all be broken down here on the Edgework Show. But for all your betting needs, the previews, picks, it will be here Monday through Friday, 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time on the Edgework HQ YouTube channel. And if you missed the show live, you can, of course, go and find us on podcasting platforms where you can listen to the show back. And if you want to track all the picks throughout the course of the season and how we've done, go over to the BetStamp app. You can find that in iOS and Android. You can find us in the Find Better section as Edgework HQ. As we've mentioned throughout this week, now the picks will be hidden until the games start, so you won't be able to see those, but you can, of course, go to the shows and watch through to the end, where you will see a recap at the end of every show of all the picks that were given out on that day. But for transparency purposes, they are tracked on there. You can see what we've done through the year. And of course, today, as I mentioned, no picks. There are no picks for today's games. If you want to throw some fun money at a little parlay there, you could be looking at Chicago Anaheim for tonight. But other than that, nothing official on today's games. Rob, thank you for doing this. This was a long one. This is probably the longest one that we've done of Edgework so far this year, but I think it was good. We got some good value out of it, good value for everybody in the chat. So thank you, Rob, for doing this. Thank you to everyone who came here and participated in the chat today. If you haven't already, subscribe to the Edgework HQ YouTube channel, like this stream, and I will see everyone back here Monday morning, 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. Good luck on your bets tonight.